On the next episode of The Humankind Connection, getting pranked isn't always very fun, but sometimes practical jokes are the language of love.
Say, love you, Helen. Love you, Helen. Love you too.
We're counting down our sweetest fooled you moments ever. Watch The Humankind Connection only on the USA Today channel.
Hi, my name is Rick Howe. I'm a TV guy, and this is my new show called Inside Television. It's the story about how the television business got to where it is today and where it's going. I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Inside Television, and I am thrilled to be here with my friend David Schreff. David, how are you?
Good to see you, Rick.
All right, so where are you talking to us from?
Greenwich, Connecticut.
Greenwich, Connecticut. Okay. Now, I knew David. We worked together at Showtime in the last century. That's a terrifying thought, isn't it? When I was there and he was there in the early 80s. But he is now doing some other stuff. So we're going to come to the present and then we're going to go jump to the past. So David, what are you doing now?
Rick, thank you very much for having me on your show today. It's great to be with you and whomever else is watching today. I'm CEO and a board director of a venture-backed company based in Los Angeles, although I'm in Connecticut, called Activate Me. It's an interactive media and marketing technology company that's been around for about 12 years. I've been CEO for about 5 of those and a board director for longer. And our focus really is taking advantage of some really interesting trends that you know and I know have occurred in the media and marketing space in recent years. And those are primarily consumers and viewers want to engage more with what they're viewing. Secondly, where possible, they want to save money and by watching.
Yep.
So whether it's we just call it connected commerce or connecting content to commerce. We know we've had a giant media business for all of these years where awareness ads and all are on and proliferate, whether it's linear streaming, digital out of home, or other, but increasingly ad agencies and brands that place those ads want to be able to prove that their advertising or their brand integration is actually resulting in a sale, or at least as closer to an intent to sell. And that's where our particular technology comes in. We've, not to go into great detail today, but we've reinvented the humble QR code. Everybody knows what a QR code is. They've been around for 30 years. During COVID and the pandemic, of course, everybody opened up a menu didn't want to touch the menu in a restaurant, so they scanned a QR code, and that behavior has proliferated from them. But what we've done is add superpowers to the humble QR code by actually enabling it to be day part programmable, breakfast, lunch, and dinner offers from the same piece of creative, linking it to the native mobile wallets that Apple and Google have, iOS and Android. So, and then being able to track from the time someone scans that, whether it's on a menu board in a restaurant or a television commercial or a piece of integrated content on a TV show, and being able to measure that consumer's journey from media scan all the way to redemption of a promotional offer from a consumer product or a telco phone, 2-for-1 iPhone, something like that. And so we have many clients around the world that work with us in television, in out of home, in major consumer brands. So that's the basis of our business. It's a attribution measurement platform that takes advantage of this fact that everybody always has their phone in their hands, don't they? Yeah. So it's an omni-channel opportunity. You can connect the journeys from linear television at home to digital out of home, of course, out of home, and we can enable that kind of data stream that is very valuable to marketers in whatever form. So
you said it's day part programmable.
Yes. So if you're let's take whoever your favorite quick service restaurant is,
Right.
doesn't matter. And let's say that they have breakfast offers until 11 o'clock in the morning. Then they switch over to lunch until 3 o'clock, and then they switch over to dinner. Menus, right?
Yeah.
But if you were trying to market to those people, you would actually, in the old days, have to have a separate QR code that would drive each one of those offers. If you have 10, 20, 30,000 franchisees, that would never work. But with ours, you place it once on the piece of creative, whether it's the menu board, the television commercial that you want to drive to store. We'll actually geo-fence all of those restaurants. And depending upon what time and what place you scan it, you'll get a different offer from the same piece of creative. So that's our secret sauce. That's our superpower capability. And because it's linked to the mobile wallets that everybody has native in their phones, we can actually say, Rick Howe scanned this SQR code on television on Sunday night while watching a football game. Yep. And 3 days later, near his local quick service restaurant, he redeemed that 2-for-1 offer from that company. And we have that entire opt-in, privacy safe measurement journey all the way through.
And then obviously, if that fast food restaurant had delivery, I could be literally one click away from buying and having someone knocking on my door in 15 minutes.
Perfect example.
The thing I just saw on television.
That's right. So it becomes shoppable content, but very interactive. I mean, we all talk about interactivity. There have been different levels of interactivity, but we actually have nailed it.
That's awesome.
But it's all opt-in. It's all consumer friendly. No one's forcing you to do it. But most people we know, if you're in your living room, consume content very often with a phone in their hand or other mobile device in their hand for whatever their reason: sports, media, watching the news, multitasking in some multimedia form.
And what surprised me a couple of years ago was the realization that an NBC, Shop NBC, 30 different variations of what they did, with a QR code on a segment of the Today Show. Initially, that QR code was about about 1/4 of the screen, lower right-hand corner, massive thing in there. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's a combination of better cameras on the phones,
yes,
high def TV, and better resolution on the QR code. And that has allowed smaller QR codes. Fact of the matter is, now I can pick up a QR code on my TV and the code is inconsequential, lower right-hand corner. It's no bigger than a bug. The promotional bugs that the networks put on their own shows. That's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference, and you've explained it extremely well. I think the only point I would add to it is duration of the QR on the screen.
Yeah.
Do it for 5 or 6 seconds, don't bother. If you do it for most of that 30 seconds it's on or longer, you'll definitely get higher engagement. So,
or if you're live, you get somebody to say, "Look here."
A live read and point to it. That's right.
Yeah, that's
NBC happens to be one of our clients, so they
really.
We do the National Dog Show with Purina next week on Thanksgiving Day and things like that. So, yeah.
All right. And there might be other things that we could do cooperatively with NBC and some other folks. Separate conversation. All right. David, I was at Showtime in 1979. And somewhere in the first couple of years, you joined Showtime in
82.
82?
Yes.
Why in the world did you come to Showtime?
I heard about you, Rick.
That's not true.
I heard about, well, first of all, I did have some excellent mentors, didn't I? You being one of them, Susan Dennison.
Right.
Neil Austrian and others were there at that time, Larry King. There were some very fine executives that we're still all friendly with, aren't we? But I think I took an MBA program at the University of Connecticut years ago. Before that,
Right.
I was working in Cablevision Systems, the Dolan Systems, at the very beginning as an assistant to the president of one of the local Connecticut cable systems. I got very interested in the programming side of the business and program marketing. And what I did to actually parlay it is, while I was taking my MBA program, I actually wrote a market research book that looked at all of the different emerging technologies at that time. So it was cable and MMDS and what became DirecTV, all the alphabet soup of technologies. And it started out really just as a senior thesis, but it wound up being, because I'd gotten original research and original feedback from many of the luminaries in the cable world at that time, it turned out to be like a 200-page book. And my professor at that time said, this is some pretty good primary research. I know somebody who would probably publish this in addition to giving you an A on the paper. Right. And he got it published, and that became my resume basically. So one of my first stops, because I was a Showtime subscriber, was Showtime. And I met you and Susan Dennison and others in the team there, and that became the opportunity from there. So it's all because my interest in that alphabet soup of multimedia technologies that we now take for granted, right? But in those days, that was the new media.
All right. Now, you kept publishing at Showtime. And you and Sandy Wildman, Padnos, did the Theft of Service Combat Kit.
We did. We noticed that was a huge industry issue. We did some survey research on behalf of Showtime, of course, with many of the cable affiliates, and they all said, yes, we're losing a lot of money to theft of service. What can we do about it? There were punitive measures legal, but those are expensive. And the thought was, let's do something that takes full advantage of the marketing prowess of Showtime at that time. And so we created a variety of amnesty programs that were promoted by a series of marketing steps, public relations steps. And we created essentially a handbook that cable operators used to recover millions of dollars of lost cable, and frankly, avoided all the legal ramifications of having to, try to send people to jail for climbing up on the telephone pole and trying to redirect the cable signal to their home, that sort of thing.
There you go. I've still got one of those somewhere upstairs. I think it's in this lovely olive green binder.
It was called the Theft of Service Combat Kit, so it had that sort of camouflaged creative design look. I don't know if it's in my bookcase here, but I still have one too, Rick. Yeah.
All right. So after a couple of years at Showtime, you went over to the Disney Channel.
I did.
And you really pissed me off when you left Showtime, but that's okay.
All right.
You went. Now, did you go to California?
No, I actually wanted to run one of the regions, and I wound up moving to Chicago to run that Midwest region, which of course was Disney country,
right,
through. And was there for about 5 years as a VP general manager of that group. Mark Handler, of course, you probably remember, was there. Charlie Nooney, who was at Showtime, moved over to Disney. So we are still friends to this day, all these years later.
Right.
And so there was a very, very good team of people that was rebuilding, I should say, Disney. Because if you recall, Rick, HBO and Showtime had the hammerlock on what was going on the pay TV side of the business. Disney was a very distant third, fourth, or fifth, depending. And they were overcharging at $14.99 per month or $12.99 a month. And while there were some people that would bundle it in at those prices, that wasn't as sustainable. So we basically, our job at the time was bolster up the programming, but then lower the prices and make it part of those HBO Showtime packages. And that worked a lot and kind of propelled the Disney Channel to a much higher level of adoption.
All right. Now, speaking of propelling, you left the Disney Channel, and what did you do at the NBA? You were head of global marketing and all that stuff.
When I was in Chicago, there was this young man named Michael Jordan who I went to see very frequently, who was a kind of a first or second year fella, great player on the Chicago Bulls. And I went with one of my neighbors, who's a law professor at Northwestern University Law School, as it turns out. And we used to see him quite a bit. And after about 5 years at Disney, we'd had our first child. We wanted to move back actually to Connecticut, which is where our families were. So there was a family as well as professional commitment. And Disney, of course, had many, many opportunities out on the West Coast, but that really wasn't for me at the time. Still love Disney for all the right reasons, but as far as moving there, it wasn't for me. And my neighbor, coincidentally, while we were sitting at a Bulls game, said, "Well, what about the NBA?" And I said, "Well, what about the NBA?" And he said, "Well, I mean, you have cable, television, marketing, licensing, content understanding." His former law partner was David Stern, the commissioner of the NBA.
There you go.
And they both worked at the same Proskauer Rose law firm. And he said, "Why don't I introduce you?" I said, "Okay." So okay. I mean, I'd love to meet him. I've obviously heard about the legendary David Stern for all the reasons. He rebuilt and rebranded and globalized the NBA. And I went there for a couple of days of interviews with him and Rick Welts, who was president at that time, Russ Granick, who was deputy commissioner, and Gary Bettman, who at the time was general counsel for the NBA, but later became the now legendary NHL commissioner. So all of those big four, and I met with them for a couple of days. And I just remember David Stern saying, "I love Disney. I want to make the NBA the Disney of sports." I said, "Really? Okay. Tell me more about that. What's that strategy?" He said, "Well, it's global, number one. Our characters, Disney characters, are our players.
Yes.
The theme parks are our arenas.
Yes.
The sponsors and licensees are looking to do more with us. And I want to use the Disney marketing model, that integrated media and marketing model, to pattern the NBA. And you're going to help us do that if you come here."
Okay.
I said, that's what I said. Okay. So within a very short time, I got a chance to do that and worked on the globalizing of the NBA, starting on the business plan for what then became the women's NBA, the WNBA, which continues to this day. Worked on the first two USA basketball Olympic dream teams in 92 and 96 that became these colossal marketing engines for the globalization of the NBA. And now every kid knows who the NBA is, and it's really second only to soccer, I suppose, as popularity. So as basketball, and the NBA did that. So there were a lot of really smart people there, and I was lucky to be able to work with all of them at that time.
Now, I noticed you have a number of basketballs lined up on the top of your bookshelf there.
I do.
I assume they are signed by somebody, right?
Michael, Magic, Larry Bird.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's lots of them. There's lots of them there.
All right. So you were president of global marketing and something else, right?
And media. Yeah, we worked with NBC and Turner as our television partners at that time. We worked on all of the sponsorship, sales, and management, and we worked on the content licensing of video games, computer games, anything that wasn't the basketball itself. There was a separate team run by a very talented gentleman named Bill Marshall, who was running the hard goods and soft goods, but I was the content side. So the library, one of the brilliant things that David Stern did, which most people within the company know, but was perhaps one of the most brilliant moments, is he said, "We should record every game."
It wasn't previously being done?
No. Because the television networks only carried a very small portion of the total games. He said, "We should record every game." Then, when the technology allowed, he said, "We should basically edit every shot so that if eventually what became NBA photos now, so that if a sponsor or a marketing partner, commercial partner says, I would like a shot of, I'm using this as purely as an example, Michael Jordan dribbling left-handed in his away uniform playing against Philadelphia,
Right.
that we'd be able to pull that down and make that part of a commercial, whether it's for Nike or Gatorade or some other sponsor. That, among other things, became, in my view, one of the most brilliant moves that he made, because you have this gigantic library of content that continues to this day. Now it's all digitized and all that, but in those days, it was a very large manual commitment to doing that. That was a lot of editors, but think about that. For news, for commercial purposes, for globalization, it's one of the unheralded parts of the moves that he made back in those days.
I used to refer to operations like that as editing by kids in sneakers. But in your case, it was kids in Michael Jordan sneakers.
It was expensive ones. That's right.
Expensive ones. Wow. All right. So now from the NBA, you got into the comic book business?
Well, one of our, yes, I became president of Marvel for a while. Marvel became, I was always a comic book fan growing up. I mean, I wanted to be Spider-Man. I don't mean wanted to work for Spider-Man. I wanted to be Spider-Man when I was growing up.
Well,
so
you had this
Peter Parker look
to you a little bit.
I came close, right? And but the opportunity there was that Marvel was actually a licensee of the NBA. Because they also, in addition to comic books, they also had trading cards, basketball trading cards. They were a licensee. So I got to know some of those folks as well. At the time, Ronald Perlman was the majority owner of Marvel Entertainment overall. And he and a couple of those folks asked me to leave the NBA, which was a very hard thing to do, and go to Marvel. But I did, and it was really fun to be able to get to know the brilliant writers and illustrators and publishing executives that made that Marvel universe come alive, and still do to this day. This was before Disney bought Marvel, of course, as a property for $4 billion at the time. But if you look at what's been happening with Disney themed content, superhero-based content over the last 20 years, 15, 20 years, it's dominated the box office. So it was a brilliant move by Disney, but it was also a brilliant move by Marvel to be part of that giant Disney infrastructure, to be part of it. So, it was really fun to be there. My wife says that I generally only join a company if they have a really good logo on a hat or a T-shirt. And I guess if you look at, some part of Viacom, Showtime, Disney, NBA, Marvel, I guess you're sort of right. Yeah.
All right. So one time I met Stan Lee at some comic event. Mm-hmm. And my son Ricky and I were getting a picture with him, and I said, I want you to know you got me through college. And his response was classic and probably fits exactly the persona that you knew. He said, so pay me.
But so now, thank you. Right.
Stan Lee is, if nothing else, the godfather of the godfather of Marvel. Did you have him in boardrooms?
We did.
What was that like?
It was brilliant, and he had an encyclopedic knowledge of every character, of every book that he'd worked on, every extension of every comic book and character that he'd created, with obviously a huge team, core and nucleus team behind him. But in fact, my very first week as president of Marvel, I flew out to LA and met with him and had dinner with him and breakfast with him at his home. It was like, I won't say it's like meeting Walt Disney, because it was meeting Stan Lee.
It was like meeting Walt Disney. Yeah.
It wasn't like meeting Walt Disney, except it was this entire, parallel universe. So could not have been a nicer gentleman to be with, and his wife the same. It was just a wonderful experience. And I know a fraction of the Marvel Universe. I know what I read when I was growing up and followed, but when you think of the thousands of characters and the storylines that had to be connected and analyzed and illustrated and written about, that the fans as well as the commercial writers and all are just some of the most brilliant people I've ever met with.
Now, he was a storyteller. He was not the artist, was he?
He was not the artist. There were other
like
many.
I know Jack Kirby was one of the guys he worked
Kirby
with. Jack Kirby was one of my heroes.
Yes. There were many. He was a writer. I mean, he was a writer and publishing mind, and obviously set up the umbrella of what that story arc should be. Yes.
So this is Marvel before Iron Man movie.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was actually before the Spider-Man movie.
All right.
Before
there was a Spider-Man movie back then, wasn't there?
But not the ones that you think about.
I know. It was a guy running around in pajamas.
Right. It wasn't the high special effects.
Not even close to that.
Not even close.
Was that yours?
No.
You don't.
That preceded. That actually preceded.
So you don't take the blame for that, huh?
I won't take the blame. I don't take the blame. It was long before me. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, if you think now about what the Marvel Universe has been for global box office and the television spin,
unbelievable,
all of that, it's billions and billions of dollars. And why is that? It's because people love storylines. They love storylines of aspiring, sometimes troubled,
flawed is
people,
the right word.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The DC guys were always too perfect, you know. Batman was the only one who was close to being flawed, but Superman and all the rest of them, they were super, and that was it. They're kind of boring, really.
Yeah, I like all of them myself, but they have different personalities for sure. But the Marvel Universe, you're right, is much more about troubled. It's the X-Men and what makes you special, what makes you sometimes abandoned or something like that. Those kind of stories really tug at the heartstrings of many people.
All right. So now do you have autographed basketballs? Do you have Stan Lee autographed comics?
I do.
Good Lord in heavens.
I do. Not a lot of them, but some, I have a few cards, a few bookmarks as well. Where his favorite expression was always Excelsior, right? I mean, Excelsior was.
Yeah.
So I have a few of those as well. So I have a nice collection here, and but I loved meeting with him. He was a brilliant person and a once in a century kind of mind.
I got that. Now, the structure of Marvel changed as you were there, right?
It did. Mostly on the financial side of it,
and that's what I mean. Yeah, the ownership in Perlman and trying to sell it and all like such as that, right?
There's books about the battles, the comic book style battles between Ronald Perlman and Carl Icahn and others, and that affected a lot of people during the time. Obviously, ultimately they righted the ship. Disney bought them, and the rest we know. But there's lots of entertainment, lots of IP-based companies that go through that kind of hand-wringing in an effort to get the right ownership structure.
No, that's right.
And really allow them to propel themselves forward.
I know there's a couple, I think, of groups of comic book publishers that are, for all intents and purposes, owned by the writers, and I would think that'd be really hard to manage.
It's hard to be a generalist. There's very few of those. You usually are a specialist in writing or illustration or publishing, and then of course running a company, I don't have to tell you, is its own set of skills, which, right? I mean, I couldn't draw any of those Marvel characters. I couldn't. I could try, but it would take me years, and I'd still not nail it.
Got it.
I admire those who can.
All right, so we're about running out of time, but I do have to ask you. You have had a wild and varied career. Where did you have the most fun?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Honestly, every one of them was fun in its own way. I'd have to say that my current job is a tremendous amount of fun because I get to work with all of those companies that I told you about before.
Yeah.
And their competitors and so forth. So I was always interested personally in the technology that was the underpinning of an NBA, a Disney, a Marvel, a Viacom, now Paramount. As far as the marketing side of it, it would probably have to be NBA and Disney, just because during those times they were both on rocket ship growth paths.
Yeah.
And let's face it, it's more fun to manage a rocket ship growth path than any other type, right?
Hanging on for dear life sometimes.
And sometimes that. So, but again, I come back to what I said earlier, Rick. I mean, the important thing is that we all know that you only succeed if you have great mentors along the way. And you've always been one of those to me, and I do appreciate that. And for purposes of this conversation, I know I told you this at the Showtime reunion recently, but you came to our wedding 39 years ago, and your gift was this brilliant, fully stacked toolbox with hammers, screwdrivers, saws, wrenches. I still have that today. I still use it for fix-ups around the house. And when I think about tool sets, that's really what I'm doing now. That's what all of us do. Is like, what tool sets do we have that we've brought with us from these different companies? I happen to be in an interactive digital toolbox that companies use right now for furthering their own needs. But I just wanted to say I appreciate that on your show.
There you go. All right, we are going to sign off. Thrilled to have David Schreff with me here on Inside Television, and we'll see everybody on the next episode. David, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rick. A great pleasure to be with you today.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.